Scene/Chapter 4. Work is stressful. Bob tells a story that should be forgot. The world has a nasty edge. It's morning. Bob is sitting at his desk and the girls do their martial arts exercises, which he watches and laughs as they jump and somersault over the furniture. They get ready throwing things at each other, and then come out of the bathroom, kiss him and go out. As he sits reviewing news tickers, a 3D Skype call rings from his news center. It's Bob's boss with two correspondents sitting at each side of him. Bob's boss is a typical I'm the boss sitting in a I'm in charge pose, which makes Bob laugh as his picture focuses. Bob's boss is always stopping him going his way by tripping him up with sidetracks to avoid his critical news leads on good social prosperity policies or those exposing corporate destruction, and always just as Bob is about to break big news on them. Bob's boss enforces a strong policy to not provide stories that can expose corporate destruction, as it upsets their corporate position for those who sponsor the news station. It annoys Bob as he has had many breaking market collapse news items squashed or delayed by weeks, as he has been told to investigate irrelevant material, so the news station has missed the breaking news and Bob has lost a moment of glory. Bob and his boss have similar temperaments of incurable life and soul of the party types, both enjoying driving the limelight. Bob is more of a blunt salesman psycho biker rather than the hedonism his boss exudes and the sometimes fawning admiration he has for Bob being a face on the world stage that his boss has always craved. Bob says to him, I'm going to call you Murphy. You always appear and stop me finding out something awful in the news that needs exposing. Hi. Boss says, yes, that's because I give them what they want and it gets you a budget to play with. Bob mutters about Far East stories being littered with Western journalists following a distorted Western journal perspective. That their perspective is totally unrepresentative of on-the-ground reality in the Far East, just to get a paycheck and not wanting their reputation to be tarnished by reality. The West appearing to be obsessed with putting the Far East down rather than working with a civilization that is far more mature than the North Atlantic nations. Bob's boss is an actor who passed all the college drama qualifications with flying colors, credits and distinctions, but did not make it onto the silver screen as he could not break into the right movie contacts. He moved to television news through his business fraternity friends so he could still be able to flounce about on the set floor. There is a picture of him and his fraternity brothers behind his desk, all pushing their fraternity rings at the camera. Bob's boss is interested in Bob mentioning a meeting with a young German genetics research professor on a plane some years earlier. Biotech and bioengineering companies have become a big booming business. The human genetic code has been exposed and brain scan analysis, set up by POTUS Obama, is done through government grants and bursaries. However, results are not released in full by government, indicating a level of private collusion on which to capitalize when a social sabotage angle is developed. After all, they paid for it, and they think of some unhinged capitalist perspective that in the information age that information is valuable. Information isn't valuable in itself. What is valuable? It's how you use it. That use is valuable, as Einstein and many others have made clear. However, manipulation of access to and what data is available is how the new propaganda machine is configured. Bob recalls to them that the chap spoke for over 8 hours. Stuff that was unavailable in the public domain but could have been in the realms of conspiracy theorists and science fiction writers who play with coincidence rather than connection. It appeared that the connections were where the coincidences in what he was saying were coming from, and that made the connection with publicized genetic research restrictions in some areas of so-called developed countries and a free-range open field elsewhere, especially in remote Pacific locations. The scientist was very inebriated, as if he was covering up his emotions for what he had seen, just like some drug mule trying to hide his guilt in drunk fuddled behavior as an excuse to pass unhindered, but in fact making him a glowing target. He apparently had been involved in genetic experiments for many years on guppies, fruit flies, nematodes and some of the mainstream GMO seed developments of foods that had no long-term research on effects before being activated for human consumption, but he was very excited by chickens and sheep and their clone research with accelerated growth using modified stem cells. He was absorbed with the mice that had been born, made, from two females, the first being called Kigaya using an immature egg or oocyte that is tricked using haploidization from an immature parent, so reducing maternal imprinting. It's called parthenogenesis or virgin birth. It is common in reptiles, some sharks and some other animals. After this human intervention in her creation, Kigaya then gave birth to normal offspring. The two journalists say in unison, intervention in her creation. Bob says yes, yes, and goes on to say the scientist shivered when he said that some human boys in South America had been found with a fetus in them and they had them removed, and that parts of South America are still uncharted. Bob says he appeared disturbed by what he called areas of the Pacific Islands, thousands of them, where he said life was cheap, not for recruitment as human trafficking but for hidden experiments, that he said make the Jurassic Park movies look like just a movie story. He appeared disgusted with what he knew but avoided direct questions, or in fact any questions, until he started babbling and ranting again. He knew a lot more than his recent experiences that were coming out foremost in his mind. The professor went on to say a newborn baby girl human is born with egg cells, oocytes, primary egg cells or ovum, in her ovaries. Between 16 and 20 weeks of pregnancy, the ovaries of a female fetus contain 6 to 7 million oocytes. Most of the oocytes gradually waste away, leaving about 1 to 2 million present at birth. None develop after birth and continue to waste away. At puberty, just over 10 years later, only about 300,000, more than enough for a lifetime of fertility, remain. Only a small percentage of oocytes mature into eggs. The many thousand of oocytes that do not mature degenerate. Degeneration progresses more rapidly in the 10 to 15 years before menopause, all are gone by menopause. Only about 400 eggs are released during a woman's reproductive life of 33 years, usually one during each menstrual cycle. Until released, an egg remains dormant in its follicle-suspended state in the middle of cell division. Thus, the egg is resilient and is one of the longest-lived cells in the human body. In the method used initially to make the mouse Kigaya, the twinning was only about 0.5% efficient, so millions were required for full experimentation. The female fetus is required to grow the oocytes, and millions are available in the female fetus before they start to decay. He said there had been a study involving Japanese women in 2012 whose reproductive stem cells were donated because they were undergoing gender reassignment surgery. Researchers at Massachusetts General Hospital were able to coax these ovarian stem cells into becoming immature human egg cells, which were then incubated in mice so they'd have the proper ovarian structures. These same scientists, working with a team at Edinburgh University, went on to fertilize them. After sperm implantation, the scientists watched the blastocysts, the first cell divisions, develop into embryos for 2 weeks, the so-called legal limit, and determine if they're viable. Then these embryos would either be frozen or allowed to perish. The tests validated the stem cell-derived human eggs, more properly called oocytes, and serve as an early indicator of whether they could someday be used to eradicate infertility and anything else they may dream up without the need for living humans as a starting organism. They said stem cell-derived oocytes could replenish the stocks of women undergoing menopause, or they could be used to allow infertile women to reproduce. They mentioned it as an elixir of youth, wherein women of any age are full of stem cell-derived oocytes, remaining fertile and youthfully healthy forever. Not so to increase population in an already overcrowded planet, but as a potential to create special purpose beings. However, the planet is already overcrowded and using 1.5 times more than it can supply, although the corporations are relying on population increase to service the debt to their investors in the unsustainable growth insanity. The slowdown in population growth is causing hidden catastrophic failure in economic formulations, and the institutions don't have an economic alternative, so are hiding the reality while they steal from society to support hidden escape locations. This artificial human embryo was the published theory under the legal limit imposed by the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority in the UK back in 2012, with no international signatory fiasco associated with it. A lot has happened since then in places on this planet where international law has never been heard of by the locals, where cannibals roam freely as a cultural activity, known as magic men, because they disappear young boys, leaving them in brown lumps in the rainforest. The coaxing of human eggs to perform in and out of human fetuses and preborn children has happened, and the ability to effectively have controlled evolutionary lineages is now extensive. He said the potential for an unlimited source of humans was available, but on an already overpopulated planet would be a disaster. However, case-guided evolution is now tested and fully available. The news team all listen in shocked silence, and then one of the correspondents mentions there is word on the streets of a central female scientist having a growing stake in stocks and shares of world biotech corporations associated with genetic materials. Bob now looks up, knowing his friends at least are on his side, providing him with logic and decent reasoned arguments. The other correspondent says, "Bob, you seem to have a lot of detail in your head." Bob says, "I am reading my notes. The topic shocked me, so I researched what he was saying and have set internet tags keeping tracks on those developments." He knew something deeper than what is available, and now many years have passed, so what disturbed him won't have stopped, and nothing is appearing on the internet, so it is appearing as a closed shop of government-funded research using public money without sharing what it has found again, unless some agencies have access to it privately. His boss asks Bob to interview several prominent women CEOs in Asia involved with mainly women products. Bob's boss appears to be tempting Bob away from his research into this woman CEO by setting up similar areas of investigation where the boss can trip Bob up and false flag hinder him away from anything scientific not involved with this antagonistic CEO who is Eurasian and whose name is Auntie, or Auntie Ant as she calls herself. However, he inadvertently gives Bob an opening rather than them being a diversion as it seems was intended. Bob makes a note that says "Hooray." Bob is continually told what to do by his boss but takes it with hidden despair. He does this to support his boss, who promotes the dependence on corporate monopolies, their bread and butter advertising and sponsorship, but Bob does not like being diverted from following his own plan of action. As it is his job on the line concerning content, Bob reverts to his old self in the video conference, wrenching his fists under his table out of view of the cameras, and, as soon as they log off, he breathes a sigh of relief and says, "I really don't want to lead this load of bullshit anymore." Bloody hell, he says to himself, I feel like Fowler in The Quiet American with Michael Caine doing as he was told. In a Michael Caine voice he says, "There is no third force, is there?" Not a lot of people know that. Bob turns back to working on his PC, doing more web research in a collection of object-oriented 3D blobs. He seems to get some subliminal teaser clips of more women 25-35 in strong corporate positions. His web searches keep bringing up the same answers, and it puzzles him as if they are being pushed at him. He phones some of the most prolific contacts who are local and arranges some meetings. While he does these searches, he gets a vast amount of what appears to be coarse sex slave Japanese full-sized rubber model links that he notes are subliminal pressure to tempt men into putting women's bodies in men's jobs based on body and not intellectual capability. He laughs as he searches men making statements about the models being good friends and they pay for themselves in not having to provide food and they don't say no to anything. The problem is only in conversation, and the internet is good for conversation even with artificial intelligence autoresponder reply software known as chatterbots based on the original Eliza and Dr. responders like ALICE, Lbot, Ultral, Cleverbot and Eugene Goostman being Loebner Prize winners of the genre. Adverts appear of auto-response girlfriend and transgender LGBT speaking models. He notes Chinese companies putting scantily clad cheerleaders in offices to cheer up staff. He smiles as this data circulates. Bob can't shake these continued similar search results even though he bypasses his profile. He continues to get comparable results that worry him.